The wind, even through the closed windows of my SUV, carried the scent of ancient earth and damp stone. It was a familiar aroma, one that usually signaled a return to the past. But today, it was laced with something colder, the distinct metallic tang that lingered after life had fled. My hands, calloused from years of digging and meticulous handling of brittle bone, tightened on the steering wheel. Most people saw a crime scene. I saw a narrative etched in the soil, whispered by the silent witnesses of time. They called me when the story didn't quite fit, when the official version felt thin, like an old manuscript with pages missing. My role wasn't to chase suspects or interrogate witnesses, but to read the final chapter written by the body itself and by the ground that held it. I was Seth, a forensic anthropologist, and the world's quiet tragedies were my canvas. The call had come just after dawn, pulling me from a half-dreamt excavation in the Egyptian desert. A frantic voice on the line, belonging to a junior officer, spoke of Blackwood Manor and Dr. Alistair Finch. Finch? A celebrated historian, his name synonymous with meticulous research into obscure, often uncomfortable aspects of the past. The official line: a tragic fall from the second-story landing. Head trauma. An accident. The winding private road to Blackwood Manor was a tunnel of ancient oaks, their branches gnarled and interwoven, blotting out the already overcast sky. When I finally emerged into the manor's clearing, the sheer scale of the place took my breath. Stone gargoyles leered from rain-streaked cornices, their expressions frozen in perpetual judgment. The air grew heavier, thick with the weight of centuries. A uniformed officer waved me through the perimeter tape, his face grim. The lead detective, a stocky man with weary eyes and a perpetually rumpled suit jacket, met me on the gravel drive. He gestured toward the imposing front entrance, where a flurry of activity suggested the usual initial chaos of a high-profile death. "Seth, glad you could make it," the detective said, his voice a low rumble. "We appreciate you coming out so quickly. It's a mess, as you can imagine. Prominent figure, historic property, everyone's on edge." "What's the preliminary assessment?" I asked, pulling on my examination gloves, their latex snapping against my wrists. My gaze swept over the manor's facade, noting the subtle tilt of a chimney, the moss clinging to the stone, the history settling like dust. "Accidental fall," he reiterated, a hint of resignation in his tone. "The historian was found at the base of the main staircase. Looks like he lost his footing, tumbled down. Single head injury. Clean, if you can call any death clean." He paused, then added, "But given his reputation, his work, and the locale, we wanted a second set of eyes." "Your eyes." I nodded, the unspoken implication hanging between us. Something feels off. It was a feeling I knew well, a premonition that often proved more accurate than any initial report. Inside, the manor's grand hall was a cavern of hushed activity. Crime scene technicians moved with practiced efficiency, their camera flashes momentarily illuminating dusty tapestries and suits of armor. The air was cool, carrying the scent of old wood, beeswax, and disinfectant. At the base of the stairs, a white sheet covered a form on the floor. A grim tableau. The historian lay still, his face a pale mask. He was a man I recognized from countless academic journals and television documentaries. Sharp, intense, now utterly placid. My eyes, trained to dissect every detail, began their silent work. The position of the body was the first thing that snagged my attention. He lay curled slightly to his left, one arm bent awkwardly beneath him. The head injury, a severe laceration near the temple, was consistent with a fall, yet the angle seemed off. Not impossible, but not quite textbook either. I examined the immediate vicinity. No obvious struggle, no scattered personal effects. The floor around him was remarkably clear, almost too clear. My gaze drifted to the oak balustrade. It was sturdy, thick, polished smooth by generations of hands. A fall from that height, down those steps, would likely involve more than a single impact point, more than just a static, singular injury. There should be scrapes, scuffs, perhaps even a splintered piece of wood, a disturbed rug. Yet there was none of that. It wasn't wood, it wasn't plaster. It was a sliver, no larger than a fingernail clipping, with a texture that seemed almost crystalline, yet dull. It looked ancient, worn smooth, but utterly out of place. It didn't belong to the manor, nor to the historian's person. I carefully retrieved it with tweezers, dropping it into a sterile evidence bag. My internal alarm bells, usually a subtle chime, began to ring with a distinct, insistent peal. An object so small, so easily overlooked, yet it spoke volumes. It was a detail that defied the neat narrative of an accident. My gaze returned to the historian's hand, specifically his right index finger. A thin, almost invisible line of grime was caked beneath the nail. It was an anachronism, a single misplaced brushstroke on an otherwise conventional portrait of demise. The detective watched me, a silent question in his eyes. I had just found the first cryptic clue. The grand hall felt like a tomb, each whispered instruction from a crime scene technician echoing in the cavernous space. Yellow tape crisscrossed the ornate floor, partitioning the scene. The air, thick with the scent of aged wood and the fainter metallic tang I knew too well, clung to my clothes. My gaze settled on the historian's body, sprawled at the foot of the sweeping staircase. Dr. Finch, a figure once vibrant with the pursuit of forgotten histories, was now a still, crumpled form, an anachronism himself in this tableau of modern investigation. I knelt, my kit bag open beside me. The lead investigator, a burly man with a perpetually tired expression, gave me a curt nod from a distance. "All yours, Seth. What do you see?" "Too early to say," I murmured, more to myself than to him. I slipped on my nitrile gloves, the material stretching taut over my fingers. My eyes, accustomed to discerning the faintest deviation, began their methodical sweep. The initial report suggested a fall, a tragic misstep on the polished marble steps. But the way Dr. Finch lay, almost deliberately placed, gnawed at me. His left arm was tucked unnaturally beneath him, his right flung wide, fingers curled into the intricate pattern of the antique Persian rug. I began with a general assessment, noting the position of the limbs, the state of the clothing. The historian wore a tweed jacket, slightly rumpled, and dark trousers. His spectacles lay shattered a few feet away, slivers of glass glinting like scattered stars. I photographed everything, a silent dialogue between my lens and the scene. Then I turned my attention to the remains themselves. My fingers, trained to read the silent language of bone, moved carefully over the visible areas. The skull, where it rested against the cold stone, showed no obvious gaping trauma. A fall from such a height, if truly accidental, should have presented more dramatic evidence of impact. I felt for depressions, for the telltale crepitus of a major fracture. Nothing immediate. But as I began to gently manipulate the body for a more thorough examination, I felt it. A subtle resistance in the historian's neck, a stiffness that was more than mere rigor mortis. I shifted my position, my gaze narrowing on the cervical spine. With extreme care, I palpated the area. A slight, almost imperceptible displacement. Not enough to be visible to the untrained eye, certainly not enough to be noted in an initial visual assessment. I spent several minutes, my brow furrowed in concentration, confirming my suspicion. There were microscopic bone fractures in the upper cervical vertebrae, a pattern that whispered of torsion, not direct impact. A fall, especially a tumbling one, would typically distribute impact forces more broadly. These fractures suggested a sharp rotational force, a sudden twisting motion. It was inconsistent with a simple head-first tumble down a staircase. My initial discomfort solidified into a tangible concern. I recorded my findings meticulously, sketching the precise location of the fractures, noting the subtle misalignment. This was not a straightforward accident. Next, I moved to the victim's clothing, using a forensic vacuum to collect trace evidence. The tweed jacket, despite its age, was remarkably clean, save for a few fibers from the rug. But as I swept the miniature nozzle across the fabric, particularly along the cuffs and the front lapels, I noticed a fine, almost imperceptible dust. It wasn't the usual house dust, nor did it match the grime I'd seen clinging to the manor's ancient stone. Under my handheld magnifier, the particles shimmered with an unusual, almost crystalline quality. I collected a generous sample, sealing it in a sterile vial. This dust was unique. I ran a quick field test for common minerals, but the results were ambiguous, hinting at a complex silicate structure, unlike anything I'd encountered in domestic settings or natural outdoor environments. My mind raced, cataloging possible origins. Construction dust? Mining? But the manor was miles from any active quarries, and there were no ongoing renovations. Found something, Seth? The lead investigator asked, his voice cutting through my thoughts. Possibly, I replied, holding up the vial. A unique mineral dust, not native to the manor as far as I can tell. And the bone fractures. They're not what I'd expect from a simple fall. His expression tightened. So, you're saying foul play? I didn't answer directly, instead focusing on the task. I need this dust analyzed urgently. I'm looking for its precise geological signature. The investigator nodded, making a note. I'll get it prioritized. My internal clock was ticking. The combination of the unusual fractures and the alien dust was a potent cocktail, solidifying my premonition. This wasn't an accident. Finch hadn't simply fallen, he had been put there. The question was how, and by whom, and why this particular dust was his silent accuser. Later that evening, after the body had been carefully removed and the scene secured, I made a call to a former colleague, a specialist in geological trace evidence. I described the dust, the color, the crystalline sheen. He listened patiently, then paused. Ochre silicate. I've seen something similar, but it's rare, not from any typical construction. It's often associated with certain types of ancient sediment, sometimes found in deep, undisturbed environments. Think very old, very specific rock formations. Or in the preserving agents for some artifacts. His words struck a chord. Ancient sediment. Artifacts. The historian's life work. Any specific locations come to mind? I pressed, my grip tightening on the phone. There's a geological vein that runs north of the city, through a forgotten industrial district. A few old structures there might contain it in their foundations or dust from stored materials. There was even a rumor years ago about a defunct financial institution, an abandoned branch bank old safety deposit room, being used for less than legitimate storage. The image of forgotten vaults, hidden treasures, and illicit dealings instantly formed in my mind. The dust, so seemingly innocuous, had just given me a direction. The manor was just the beginning. The sterile hum of the air purifier was the only sound in the small analysis room, a stark contrast to the dust-choked manor. I leaned over the microscope, my gaze fixed on the slide. The minute particles, collected from the late historian's study, glowed under the polarized light, revealing their crystalline structure. A colleague, a meticulous analyst with an uncanny ability to translate geological signatures into geographic coordinates, slid a folder across the workbench. "It's a match, Seth," the colleague stated, their voice low. "A very specific kind of chert, speckled with trace elements of apatite and zircon. Not common around here at all. We cross-referenced it with geological surveys. There's only one known formation in the region that fits the profile." My eyes lifted from the eyepiece, locking onto the aerial map in the folder. A red circle marked a remote, heavily forested area, miles from the nearest paved road. And within that circle, a smaller, almost imperceptible dot. My finger traced the line. This is where Finch was doing his... extracurricular research, wasn't it? The colleague nodded slowly. Unofficial, highly secretive. We heard rumors he'd been digging on private land, no permits. Locals call it the Old Ridge. There's an abandoned quarry nearby and an old financial institution. My internal monologue shifted into high gear. The dust found at the manor was not merely a random contaminant. It was a geological fingerprint pointing directly to Finch's unsanctioned dig site and, by extension, to a potential hub for whatever illicit activities he was involved in. The manor was just the beginning indeed. The chert wasn't from the bank, but from the dig site, meaning whoever visited Finch's study had been at the dig or handled artifacts from it, and then at the bank. The pieces were starting to slot into place, forming a jagged, unsettling mosaic. I packed my minimal gear, the weight of the investigation settling heavy on my shoulders. The drive to the old ridge was a study in desolation. Paved roads gave way to gravel, then to a barely discernible track swallowed by encroaching undergrowth. The air grew cooler, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The trees formed a dense canopy, filtering the afternoon sun into fractured slivers. The silence out here was profound, broken only by the crunch of my boots on fallen twigs and the distant cry of a hawk. Finally, the track opened into a clearing. A faded sign, barely legible, still clung precariously above the main entrance. The heavy, reinforced door of the vault within was ajar, a dark maw leading into deeper shadow. This wasn't a bank. It was a tomb, a repository for forgotten secrets. I stepped inside, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light, thick and ancient. But underneath, I detected faint disturbances. A thin film of newer dust had been scuffed, not recently, but within the last few weeks. A faint metallic tang, almost imperceptible, hung in the air. Not rust, but something else. A mineral scent, vaguely familiar like the chert from the lab, but mixed with something older, more earthy. Boot prints, partially obscured but distinct, marred the grime on the concrete floor, leading directly towards the gaping vault. They were too large for Finch, too heavy. Empty safety deposit boxes, their tiny doors ripped open, lined the walls like silent screams. But it wasn't truly empty. In a far corner, beneath a layer of settled dust, I found it. A small, intricately carved wooden fragment, no bigger than my thumb. It didn't belong in a bank, not even an abandoned one. This was more than a meeting place. It was a transaction point. My next step was clear. Finch's estranged research assistant. Finch had been a recluse, but even recluses sometimes confided in their closest associates. Finch's records, meticulously kept even in his unofficial pursuits, pointed to a young assistant who had abruptly severed ties with him months before his death. I found the assistant in a small, cluttered apartment on the outskirts of the nearest town, the kind of place that always seemed to smell faintly of stale coffee and forgotten ambitions. The door opened slowly, revealing a gaunt figure, their eyes wide with a mixture of suspicion and fear. They were younger than I expected, probably in their late 20s, their face etched with lines that spoke of chronic stress. "I'm investigating Dr. Finch's death," I stated, my voice even, holding up my identification. "I believe you might be able to help me understand his recent work." The assistant's gaze flickered, darting around my face, then past me to the empty hallway. "I haven't worked for him in months. We parted ways." Their voice was reedy, hesitant. "I know," I replied, stepping just inside, not quite invading their space, but making my presence felt. "But you worked with him long enough to know his obsessions. His recent fascination with the old ridge formation, for instance, and the chert dust from that area found at his manor. It suggests a connection." Their eyes widened further, a tremor running through their frame. "Chert? What are you talking about?" "The geological signature from the unsanctioned dig site," I clarified, watching them closely. "The one he was so secretive about. the one you helped him with before you left. I let the implication hang in the air, the unasked question of why they left. The assistant swallowed hard, their hands clenching at their sides. He changed. The last few months, he was consumed. Always talking about a lost artifact, something that would rewrite history. He started meeting with people, not academics, not collectors. Figures, enigmatic. A gasp escaped their lips, their eyes mirroring my own dawning realization. How did you know about that? The fear in their eyes was palpable now, no longer just suspicion. Finch. The assistant shook their head violently, stepping back, bumping into a stack of old books. I don't know their names, just powerful people. They promised Finch access, resources, but then he found something they didn't want found, something that was supposed to stay buried. Their voice broke, choked with unshed tears. He said it was too dangerous. He said he couldn't trust anyone. The air crackled with unspoken threats. Finch hadn't just died in a tragic fall. The lost artifact, the enigmatic figures. And I was standing right in the path of it. The gravel road crunched under my tires, each stone a small percussion against the rising tension in my gut. The estate grounds, once manicured, now stretched into wilder, overgrown sections, leading toward the designated archaeological dig site. The morning sun, a pale smear in a bruised sky, cast long, distorted shadows of skeletal trees across the uneven terrain. I drove past the main house, a silent sentinel, and continued toward the cordoned-off area, a yellow tape fluttering like a warning flag in the sparse breeze. When I finally reached the site, a shallow depression in the earth marked by flagging tape and a few rusted tools, the air was still and heavy. No archaeologists were present, no students sifting through soil, just the silent wind and the evidence of recent disturbance. My eyes immediately scanned the ground, trained to pick out anomalies. The official report had stated the dig was inactive for weeks, but the disturbed soil near a freshly dug trench told a different story. The earth here was looser, a darker shade, and the faint imprint of a modern boot, deeper than the faded tracks of the legitimate team, was undeniable. Someone had been here recently, not with the delicate brushes of an archaeologist, but with a shovel and purpose. A discarded plastic zip tie, incongruous against the ancient dust, glinted near a pile of excavated rock. Illicit activity. My suspicions solidified. I knelt, pulling on my gloves, and began a methodical sweep. The official narrative of a simple fall was unraveling faster than I could document it. Then, my fingers brushed against something smooth, unyielding, distinct from the rough pebbles. I carefully unearthed it. It was a small fragment, no larger than my thumbnail, of what appeared to be pottery. The clay was fine-grained, fired to a deep, resonant terracotta. What caught my eye was the decoration, a series of intricate geometric patterns, painted in a pigment that seemed to shimmer with an almost metallic sheen. This was no ordinary local earthenware. This fragment spoke of a craftsmanship, a stylistic signature that was entirely alien to the known historical periods of this region. Anachronistic. Finch hadn't just been digging for local history. He'd stumbled upon something far more exotic, something that shouldn't have been here. This wasn't just a dig site. It was a black market transfer point, or a hidden repository. I carefully secured the fragment in a sterile evidence bag, my mind racing. The lost artifact, the enigmatic figures. It wasn't just a theory anymore. My phone vibrated, an unwelcome intrusion. It was the lead detective, his voice tight, strained. Seth, I need you to finalize your report. We're getting immense pressure from above. The preliminary findings point to an accidental fall. Case closed. Accidental? I retorted, my voice sharper than I intended. I've found fresh activity at the dig site, evidence of recent excavation that wasn't sanctioned. And I've just recovered a piece of pottery that doesn't belong here. not by 1,000 years. A pause stretched, heavy with unspoken warnings. Look, I appreciate your thoroughness, but we have to be realistic. Things get moved. People dig. This isn't a murder investigation, Seth. Not officially. Finish your findings, but stick to the facts we know. The facts I know are accumulating, and they point in a very different direction, I countered, but he was already moving on. Just get it done. And don't go poking around where you don't belong. The line went dead. The conversation left a bitter taste. They weren't just pressured. They were actively trying to suppress any deviation from the official story. My gut tightened. This wasn't just about a historian's death. It was about protecting a narrative, a secret. I fumbled with my keys, the weight of the pottery fragment in my pocket a constant reminder. The moment I pushed the door open, I knew. The latch was slightly askew, the faint scrape marks around the lock plate almost invisible to an untrained eye. Inside, nothing seemed overtly disturbed. My microscope was where I'd left it, the spectral analysis equipment dormant. Files on my desk were shuffled, but no drawers were forced, no cabinets ransacked. It was a ghost of a search, meticulous yet superficial. They hadn't been looking for anything specific to steal. They'd been looking for what I knew. They'd wanted to see how close I was. My gaze fell on the whiteboard where I'd scrawled Finch's last cryptic notes, the ones I'd pieced together from his fragmented journal. And a single, underlined phrase. Old vaults. It was a warning. And the message was clear. I was too close. They knew I was onto something. My eyes darted back to Finch's notes. The address wasn't far from the estate, an obscure industrial district that had seen better days. A forgotten corner of the city. Finch had been tracking something there, something precious enough to kill for. And now, I was going to find out what. My hands still trembled slightly, a phantom echo of the forced entry into my own temporary dwelling. The break-in hadn't been about valuables. They'd left my laptop, my wallet, everything of obvious worth. They'd simply made a statement, a violent whisper that I was treading where I shouldn't. The address from Finch's notes felt heavy in my palm. A lifeline or a noose, I couldn't yet tell. The industrial district was a skeletal sprawl of disused factories and boarded-up storefronts, their brickwork stained with decades of grime. Rusting rail tracks snaked through cracked asphalt, leading nowhere. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of decay and the distant thrum of unseen machinery. Its facade, once grand, was now a crumbling testament to forgotten prosperity. The ornate bronze doors were chained shut, the windows opaque with grime and reinforced with ugly steel grates. A faded sign, half peeled, proclaimed a name I no longer recognized. I circled the perimeter, my gaze sharp, searching for any sign of recent activity, any fresh disturbance in the dust and debris. Nothing. This place felt truly abandoned, a ghost in the machine of the city. A small service entrance around the back offered less resistance. The lock had been pried, crudely, but long ago. Finch hadn't been the first to breach it. Or perhaps his was the only recent entry. I pushed the heavy metal door inward. It groaned on rusted hinges, revealing an interior plunged into near-total darkness. Cobwebs draped from the high ceilings like forgotten tapestries. The main banking hall was a cavernous space, the counters stripped bare, the teller's windows shattered. My focus, however, was on the vault. A massive circular door, a fortress of steel, stood slightly ajar at the back. It was ajar enough for a person to slip through. I squeezed through the narrow gap. But one box, halfway down the third row, caught my eye. It wasn't empty. A small, tarnished brass key hung from its lock. Finch's key. Inside, nestled amongst a few yellow documents and a slim, leather-bound journal, was a small, sealed evidence bag. Within it lay the pottery fragment. Not the one from the estate, but a twin. The same intricate patterns, the same unusual clay composition, but this one was accompanied by a handwritten label. Sample B, UV analysis complete. I pulled out a compact UV lamp from my kit, a tool I rarely needed outside the lab. Under the ultraviolet light, the fragment from the estate, which I'd brought with me, glowed with an unnerving, uniform luminescence. The ancient pigments, the patina of age. They should have shown subtle variations, uneven absorption. But this was too perfect. Then I examined sample B from the bag. Under the UV light, the difference was stark. The surface of sample B, though visually identical in ambient light, pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible aura of modern polymers. The ancient pigments, the subtle mineral inclusions I detected, were there, yes. But they were bound, stabilized by something entirely anachronistic. A binder. A sophisticated synthetic resin that mimicked the organic decay of millennia. The unusual composition, the pristine condition of the fragment at the estate, the almost too perfect preservation. It wasn't just ancient, it was manufactured ancient. An incredibly sophisticated forgery. My initial assessment had been skewed by its sheer brilliance. This wasn't just a copy, it was a masterpiece of deception, designed to fool even an expert. Finch hadn't been researching ancient artifacts. He'd been exposing a high-stakes forgery ring. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Finch hadn't been killed over a historical dispute. The illicit trade of ancient artifacts wasn't just about smuggling genuine pieces. It was about creating them, indistinguishable from the real thing, to flood the market. This explained the warning, the brutality. I wasn't just investigating a death. I was unraveling a criminal enterprise. The journal lay open beside the fragment. Finch's elegant script filled its pages, not with historical musings, but with coded entries, financial figures, and dates that corresponded with obscure auction houses. He'd been building a case. And then, he'd died. I slipped the fragment and the journal back into the bag, my mind already pivoting. The estate. Finch's study. I needed to re-examine everything, now with this new lens. He must have kept more. Something to fully expose them. Back at the estate, the familiar grandeur felt like a deceptive shroud. Finch's study, once a sanctuary of intellect, now seemed like a vault of secrets. I went over every inch of it again, tracing the lines of the bookshelves, tapping panels, searching for anything out of place. My fingers brushed against the spine of a weighty tome on ancient Sumerian pottery. It was slightly recessed. I pulled. The tablet was locked, its interface demanding a complex passphrase. Encrypted files. But the parchment, I unrolled it carefully. It wasn't a historical document. It was a map, hand-drawn, crisscrossed with cryptic symbols and coordinates, some circled in red ink. A network of lines connected points, some marked with faded crosses, others with a single, bold X. The map wasn't of the estate, or even the surrounding region. It was a sprawling, disjointed collection of locations, many unfamiliar, some disturbingly close to industrial zones like the one I just left. One set of coordinates, heavily circled, pointed directly to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. Finch hadn't just found a forgery ring, he'd mapped its operations. And now I held his unfinished work. The warning hadn't been a deterrent, it had been a confirmation. The coordinates glowed faintly on the screen of the rugged tablet, a single, insistent beacon on a map that refused to make sense. The heavily circled location, an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city, was where I had just been. That much was clear. But what about the others? I couldn't stay at the factory. The air was too cold, too exposed, and the lingering dust tasted of decay and forgotten industry. I needed a place where I could think, where I could spread out my equipment without fear of interruption, a place with its own kind of security. My gaze drifted to the tablet, then to the encrypted storage device I'd found with the map. I drove for what felt like hours, the city lights receding into a dull glow behind me as I headed towards a forgotten corner of the urban sprawl. It was a relic of a bygone era, tucked away behind a crumbling facade of granite and broken glass. I'd used it before, years ago, for a particularly sensitive decryption project. The thick vault doors, though rusted shut, offered a psychological barrier, a sense of impenetrable solitude. The main lobby was a cavernous space, dust motes dancing in the slivers of moonlight that pierced the grimy windows. I bypassed the teller's cages and the manager's office, heading straight for the back. The heavy, steel-reinforced door to the vault area stood ajar, a testament to the decades of neglect. This was my temporary sanctuary. I set up my workstation on a discarded table, a forensic kit laid out with surgical precision. The tablet, the encrypted drive, a spectrum analyzer, and a portable decryption rig hummed to life. I started with the map, zooming in, cross-referencing the coordinates with satellite imagery. Many pointed to derelict industrial sites, much like the factory I'd just visited. Others marked remote, sprawling estates, reminiscent of the one where the historian had met his end. A pattern began to emerge, not of random locations, but of specific types of properties. Abandoned, isolated, or historically significant. They were nodes in a network. But for what purpose? My fingers flew across the keyboard, running algorithms, parsing data, looking for anomalies. The map wasn't just geographical. It contained layers of encrypted text, a secondary code built into the lines and symbols. After an hour of intense concentration, a string of characters resolved into a sequence of dates, each corresponding to a location. Not dates of construction or even acquisition, but dates centuries old, some millennia. It was like a timeline, charting the movement of something across vast spans of time and space. My gut tightened. This wasn't about modern-day illicit trade alone. This was something far older, far more entrenched. Next, the encrypted files. The device hummed under my touch, its internal components whirring as my software attacked its defenses. The historian had been meticulous, a digital fortress of layered encryption. But I was more stubborn. Lines of code scrolled across my screen, a rapid-fire cascade of successes and failures. Then, a breakthrough. A directory unlocked, revealing folders labeled with cryptic names. I opened the first. Financial ledgers. Vast sums of money flowing through shell corporations and offshore accounts. The names associated with these transactions were a roll call of the ultra-wealthy, prominent figures in academia, industry, and even politics. It was a dizzying web of influence and power. My brow furrowed. These weren't petty criminals. These were individuals with the means to shape narratives, to rewrite history. Another folder. This one contained scanned documents, ancient texts, and photographs of artifacts. Some I recognized from museum collections, others I knew only from rare academic journals. But these weren't just images. They were accompanied by meticulous provenance reports, often contradictory to the public record. There were discussions, coded conversations about authenticity and recontextualization. Then I saw the names. The legacy. The keepers. The words hit me like a physical blow. The files spoke of a clandestine society dedicated to the preservation and protection of this legacy. But the context, the financial transactions, the manipulation of historical records, it wasn't preservation in the academic sense. It was control. The keepers weren't safeguarding history. They were curating it, twisting it, perhaps even burying parts of it. My breath hitched. He hadn't just stumbled upon a forgery ring. He'd uncovered a global conspiracy, a network of powerful individuals who weren't just trading artifacts. They were controlling the very narrative of history, leveraging genuine, priceless relics for their own obscure ends. I was no longer just investigating a death. I was peeling back layers of a deception that had been carefully woven for centuries, and I had the distinct, unsettling feeling that The keepers knew I was looking. They hung there, a half-formed whisper of a name that promised an answer, or perhaps a new layer of obfuscation. I had to know. My research, a frantic dive into forgotten academic journals and obscure historical society memberships, led me to him. A retired curator, a man once revered in archaeological circles, now living in quiet obscurity. He had been a mentor to the deceased historian Dr. Finch decades ago. He was my only lead to understanding the fragmented information I'd found. The address had been scribbled on a damp napkin he'd pushed across a cafe table before quickly retreating into the anonymity of the midday crowd. The building itself was a skeleton of its former self, a forgotten monument to financial security. A broken pane in the heavy front door hung precariously, rattling in the faint breeze that snaked through the city's back alleys. Inside, the main lobby was a cavern of peeling paint and dust motes dancing in the slivers of sunlight that pierced the grimy windows. Fallen ceiling tiles lay scattered like discarded bones, their fibrous edges fuzzy with mold. Every step I took sent a cloud of fine, desiccated plaster into the air, and the scent of decay, a mix of damp paper, stale metal, and forgotten ambition clung to the air. I moved through the lobby, my footsteps loud and hollow, echoing off the high ceilings. The teller stations were stripped bare, the thick glass enclosures shattered. He wasn't in the main area. I followed the faint glow of an emergency light, still inexplicably powered, down a narrow corridor. It led to a heavy, rust-pitted steel door standing ajar. This had to be it. This was the vault, the old safety deposit room. A single bare bulb hanging from a frayed wire cast weak, jaundiced light over the scene. In the center of the room, perched precariously on an overturned wooden crate, sat the retired curator. He was a wisp of a man, his frame shrunken, his once sharp eyes now cloudy behind thick spectacles. His hands, gnarled and liver-spotted, clutched a worn leather satchel. He didn't look up, instead staring at a particular empty box, as if expecting something to materialize within it. "I did," I replied, my voice more forceful than I intended. The tension in the room was palpable. A heavy blanket. These mention a legacy and an organization dedicated to its preservation and protection. They also mention the key. I believe you know what that stands for. He flinched, a subtle tremor running through his thin shoulders. He finally lifted his gaze, meeting mine. Fear was etched around his eyes, deep-set lines that spoke of more than just age. Some things are best left buried, young man. Dr. Finch understood that, eventually. Dr. Finch ended up dead, I stated, my voice devoid of accusation, only fact. And the circumstances suggest he knew too much. I found this at the scene. I pulled out a small, sealed vial containing a pinch of the unique mineral dust, the same anachronistic element I'd found on the historian's clothes and the estate's ancient floorboards. "Does this mean anything to you?" He took the vial, holding it up to the weak light. His breath hitched. His eyes, though clouded, focused with an unnerving intensity on the iridescent particles. A long silence stretched between us, punctuated only by the distant hum of the emergency light. "The Keepers," he finally breathed, the full name leaving his lips like a confession. They call themselves the Keepers of the Legacy. Not preservation, no, control, absolute control, of history, of knowledge, of wealth. They've been doing it for centuries, manipulating archaeological finds, suppressing discoveries that don't fit their narrative, funneling artifacts into a black market that funds their operations. His voice grew stronger, fueled by a surge of old resentment, or perhaps fear of what he was revealing. They found Dr. Finch's work disruptive. He was getting too close to their private collections, their holdings. "And this dust?" I pressed, gesturing to the vial still clutched in his trembling hand. He swallowed hard, his gaze still fixed on the shimmering dust. That is unique. He was found only in one specific location, an estate. Not the one where Dr. Finch died, but another. Much older, more remote. It's known as Blackwood Manor. It's rumored to house one of the most extensive private collections of illicitly acquired antiquities in the world. Treasures. Finch was obsessed with it, always trying to find a way in. The anachronistic dust, the historian's death, the files hinting at a clandestine society, and now Blackwood Manor, a remote private estate rumored to be a hub for stolen artifacts. This wasn't just about a tragic fall. It was a carefully orchestrated elimination. Blackwood Manor, I repeated, the name tasting like ash on my tongue. How do I get there? The curator looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate plea. You don't. You walk away, Seth. They are everywhere. They are powerful. You'll end up like Dr. Finch. I shook my head slowly, the words of warning washing over me, doing little to deter my resolve. I can't. Not now. Not when I know what I know. The image of Dr. Finch's broken body, the tiny flecks of impossible dust, solidified my conviction. Blackwood Manor was my next destination, a tangible lead in a conspiracy that stretched back further than I could possibly imagine. I had to go. The words of warning from the former colleague had been a gust of wind against a granite wall. They'd done nothing but sharpen my resolve. Dr. Finch's broken body, the microscopic flecks of impossible dust, they were etched into my mind. This wasn't merely a forensic investigation anymore. It was a crusade for truth, and I was about to walk into the lion's den. Elias Thorne's estate was my target, but first a detour, a ghost of a lead that whispered of an old transaction, a coded message from a forgotten informant. The air inside was thick with the scent of mildew and decaying paper, a testament to years of neglect. My boots crunched on fallen plaster and shattered glass. A specific box, marked with a faded, hand-scrawled 117, was my quarry. I pulled a small, custom-made lockpick from my kit, its polished steel cool against my gloved fingers. The tumblers clicked with soft, precise sounds, a familiar rhythm. The box sprang open. Inside, nestled among a few brittle yellow documents, was a small, crudely drawn map and a single tarnished keycard. This was my entry. Hours later, under the cloak of a moonless night, I approached the perimeter of Thorne's sprawling estate. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth from the surrounding forest. The estate itself was a fortress, a blend of ancient stone and cutting-edge surveillance. Infrared cameras swept the tree line, motion sensors were undoubtedly buried beneath the manicured lawns, and silent drones probably patrolled the higher airspace. But the map, retrieved from the old safety deposit box, pointed to a blind spot, a weakness. My equipment was minimal. Night vision goggles, a multi-tool, a small comms device, and a compact camera. The service entrance was exactly as depicted. An unassuming metal door set into a low stone wall, partially obscured by overgrown ivy. A small, almost invisible panel next to it housed a card reader. I swiped the tarnished keycard. A soft click echoed in the stillness, followed by a faint whirring sound. The door unlocked. I slipped inside, closing it silently behind me. The air within was stale, cool. I found myself in a utilitarian corridor, concrete walls leading into the heart of the estate. The map guided me through a labyrinth of service tunnels and disused storage areas. After what felt like an eternity, the corridor opened into a vast, brightly lit space. This was it. The forgery workshop. My breath hitched. The scale of the operation was staggering. Workbenches lined the walls, laden with specialized tools I recognized from my own studies. Microscopes, laser engravers, chemical baths, and an array of pigments and resins. The air smelled of chemicals, dust, and something else. A metallic tang I couldn't quite place. This wasn't amateur hour. This was a state-of-the-art facility, capable of creating objects that could fool even the most seasoned experts. I moved quickly, documenting everything with my camera, my mind racing to process the implications. This workshop wasn't just producing fakes, it was producing perfect fakes, designed to flood the market, to distort history. But where were the genuine articles? The map had hinted at something more. Following a series of barely visible directional arrows etched into the concrete floor, I found another door, this one reinforced with layers of steel and an intricate digital keypad. The keycard from the bank wouldn't work here. This required a different approach. My multi-tool, a marvel of miniaturized technology, came into play. I worked methodically, bypassing the sophisticated lock, my focus absolute. Each click, each soft whir of the mechanism was a tiny victory. Finally, the heavy door swung inward with a faint hiss of displaced air, revealing a chamber bathed in a soft, amber glow. This was no workshop. This was a vault. And what a vault it was. Glass display cases, climate-controlled and hermetically sealed, lined the walls, housing an astonishing collection of artifacts. A perfectly preserved Mycenaean dagger, its gold hilt shimmering. A collection of pre-Columbian gold figurines, their intricate details breathtaking. A set of Sumerian cuneiform tablets, still bearing traces of the Mesopotamian soil from which they were ripped. These weren't copies. These were genuine, priceless pieces of human history, clearly stolen, meticulously preserved, and likely awaiting authentication by the very forgeries being created next door. I raised my camera, my hands trembling slightly, documenting every single piece, every provenance tag, every damning detail. This was the proof. This was what Dr. Finch had died for. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine pierced the air, growing louder, more insistent. A red light flashed above the vault door, casting a garish pulse across the ancient artifacts. The hum of machinery shifted, becoming a low growl. A voice, synthesized and devoid of inflection, echoed through the chamber. Intruder detected. Perimeter breach. Lockdown initiated. Thorne's advanced security systems. I'd been found. Adrenaline surged, clearing my head. The vault door began to slide shut, slowly but inexorably. I had precious seconds. I squeezed off a few more shots, focusing on a particularly ornate sarcophagus lid before whirling around. I slid under the closing door just as it slammed shut with a final echoing thud. The corridor outside was now bathed in a pulsating red light. Alarms blared, shrill and disorienting. Footsteps pounded in the distance. I sprinted back the way I came, navigating the maze of service tunnels by instinct. The element of surprise was gone. Now it was a race against time, a desperate dash for freedom. My heart hammered against my ribs, but it wasn't fear. It was the fierce beat of determination. I had the evidence. Now I just had to get out alive. I squeezed, not under the colossal vault door itself, but under the heavy, reinforced cloak of the security grille that descended a split second after the door began its inexorable slide. The metal shrieked above me, a protesting groan of ancient engineering meeting modern hydraulics. I rolled, a desperate scramble on the cold stone floor, the sound of the closing mechanism of physical pressure against my eardrums. My outstretched hand connected with something sharp and rough. A small, irregular shard, chipped from the sarcophagus lid I'd targeted, dug into my palm. I clutched it, a tangible piece of the illicit puzzle, and lunged for the narrow gap that remained, just wide enough for my body. The impact of the grill locking into place reverberated through the very bedrock, a final, definitive clank that sealed off Thorne's secret. My heart hammered, not from exertion, but from the raw, stark proximity of discovery. I was out, but exposed. Thorne's operation was sophisticated. His security systems hadn't just found me, they were likely tracking my egress from the estate. I moved with a predator's caution, a ghost in the pre-dawn gloom, retracing my steps through the manicured grounds, past the silent, judging statues. Every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl, sharpened my senses to a knife edge. I'd used it before, a clandestine bolt hole for cases that veered into the truly dangerous. The main hall was a skeletal expanse of peeling paint and shattered glass, but the vault, a hulking steel behemoth, remained stubbornly intact. I picked the rusted lock on the outer door, a skill honed by years of unorthodox access, and stepped into the suffocating darkness. The air hung thick with the scent of damp concrete and forgotten paper. This was my war room. I laid out my equipment on a corroded steel table, pulling a portable forensic kit from my worn satchel. Digital camera, macro lens, tweezers, sample bags, a portable microscope, and my laptop a lifeline to my work. My hands, still trembling slightly, worked with practiced efficiency. First, the shard from the sarcophagus. Under the intense beam of my task lamp, its surface revealed a finely carved, almost impossibly intricate pattern. It was undeniably ancient in aesthetic, but something felt wrong. I rotated it, examining the fracture points, the patina. Then, on the reverse, a tiny, almost imperceptible etching. A symbol. 3 interlocking triangles, barely visible beneath a film of dust and grime. I photographed it, multiple angles, macro shots. Next, I cross-referenced it. I pulled up images from Finch's study, the estate's archives I'd briefly accessed, even the subtle decorative motifs on some of Thorne's furniture I'd photographed. The symbol was there, hidden in plain sight. A tiny crest on a signet ring Finch had worn in a faded photograph, a decorative element on the spine of a rare book in Thorne's library, a barely discernible watermark on an old parchment I'd found tucked away. It was the mark of the keepers, a signature of their illicit trade, a brand on their manufactured legacy. The true breakthrough, the reveal that solidified everything, came when I paired the sarcophagus shard with the trace evidence I'd meticulously collected from Finch's death scene. On the back of the shard, trapped in a minute crevice of the ancient stone, I found a faint, almost microscopic residue. Under the microscope, it resolved into tiny, fibrous particles. I compared its spectral analysis to samples from Finch's clothing, from the stone balustrade he'd fallen from, and from the peculiar, almost waxy substance I'd found on the historical document he'd been studying. It was a match. The fibrous residue on the sarcophagus shard was identical to the fibers from Finch's tweed jacket. Not only that, but the waxy substance, which I'd initially struggled to identify, showed identical chemical markers to a thin, almost invisible film coating the symbol on the shard. This wasn't merely an ancient artifact. It was an active piece of Thorne's operation, handled recently and in close proximity to Finch. Finch, a historian obsessed with authenticity, discovers the keeper's anachronistic forgeries. He finds their symbol, perhaps even recognizes it from his own research into forgotten societies. He confronts Thorne, perhaps even handles a piece like the sarcophagus lid, or one of its fragments, leaving behind the fibers from his jacket. The waxy residue could be a preservative, or a sealant for the authenticity of the forged pieces. The evidence piled up. The anachronistic details in the ancient artifacts at Thorne's estate, the hidden keeper symbols, the direct physical link between Finch's person and a piece of Thorne's illicit collection, the sheer impossibility of Finch's accident given his meticulous nature. I organized the photographs, the chemical analyses, the microscopic images, the detailed notes on stratigraphic context and material analysis. Each piece dovetailed perfectly with the next, forming an unassailable forensic narrative. My fingers flew across the keyboard, compiling the final report. The tension in my shoulders was a constant ache, a physical manifestation of the danger I now faced. Thorne wouldn't tolerate exposure. He had proven his ruthlessness with Finch, and the police force, or at least elements within it, were compromised. I couldn't just walk into a precinct and lay this out. I needed to be strategic, to deliver the evidence to someone uncorrupted, someone with the authority to act. I finished the report, a comprehensive dossier of Thorne's crimes and the Keeper's conspiracy. But the truth finally was a weapon in my hands. I closed the laptop, the screen reflecting my grim, determined face. The game was no longer about discovery. It was about survival and bringing down a legacy built on lies and murder. I rolled, a clumsy tumble in the suffocating dark, landing hard on my shoulder. The metal shrieked above me, a protesting groan of ancient engineering meeting modern hydraulics, then slammed shut with the finality of a tomb. Dust, thick and acrid, plumed into the air, illuminated by the single sputtering emergency light recessed in the ceiling. I was in. My breath hitched, ragged and shallow. The air tasted of rust, stale paper, and the cold, metallic tang of forgotten ambition. Thorn. He emerged from the shadow of a towering stack of boxes, a silhouette against the faint light filtering from the vault beyond. He held something in his hand, a glint of polished metal reflecting the meager illumination. Not a weapon, I realized, but a small, ornate key. A key to one of these forgotten boxes. "You knew I'd come," I stated, pushing myself to my feet, my shoulder aching. My gaze swept the room, searching for an exit, a weapon, anything. My forensic kit, abandoned in the rush, was useless now. "I knew you were close," Thorn corrected, a thin, humorless smile playing on his lips. "You always were. Too curious for your own good, Seth. Like Dr. Finch." The mention of the historian's name sent a fresh wave of ice through me. Finch found out, didn't he? Not about the trade, not just the artifacts. He found out about the keepers, about the true legacy you're so desperate to preserve. Thorn took a slow step forward, the key still clutched in his hand. He was a scholar. Brilliant, but he lacked discretion. He saw the truth, yes, but he didn't understand its fragility, its necessity. Some knowledge is too powerful for the uninitiated. Powerful or profitable? I countered, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. You staged his fall, made it look like an accident. But you missed the details, Thorn. The very details I dedicate my life to finding. He paused, a flicker of something annoyance? Respect? In his eyes. Go on, amuse me. I took a breath, forcing myself to channel my internal monologue into a clear, concise exposition, just as I would in a courtroom. The soil. Microfragments embedded deep in Dr. Finch's shoe soles. Not from the manor grounds, but from the Forgotten Canyon excavation site. A site you were secretly exploring, known only to a select few. A site that yielded the amulet of Kemet. Thorn's smile vanished. His grip tightened on the key. Then there's the unique wear pattern on his fingernails, I continued, pushing my advantage. Consistent with manipulating ancient clay tablets. Specifically, the cuneiform tablets you coveted, the ones detailing the ritualistic use of the amulet. He wasn't just observing, he was working with them. My eyes scanned the intricate rows of boxes, the heavy, bolted doors. This was a trap, but it was also a stage. And finally, the scent. Faint, almost imperceptible to anyone else. But I've trained my senses. A specific ancient resin, used in tomb sealing, clinging to his clothing. He'd been in close proximity to freshly unearthed, sealed artifacts. He found the amulet, didn't he? He was trying to document it, to understand it before you could hide it away. Thorn moved, a sudden swift dart forward, closing the distance between us. The polished key flashed. He was going to expose everything. The true purpose of the keepers. The lineage. The power. His voice dropped to a guttural snarl. He sealed his own fate. "And you sealed yours," I retorted, sidestepping his lunge. He was surprisingly quick for a man of his age, fueled by a desperate fanaticism. The key, I realized, wasn't just a symbol. It was a makeshift weapon, its sharp edges intended to inflict pain. I ducked under a swinging arm, the air whistling past my ear. My mind raced, calculating angles, escape routes, potential leverage. He might know this place intimately, but I saw it through a different lens. One of physics, of human kinetics, of structural weaknesses. The amulet of Kemet, I gasped, baiting him. It's not just a relic, is it? It's a key. A key to what, Thorn? Finch threatened to unravel? My words struck a nerve. Thorn let out a frustrated cry, his pursuit becoming more aggressive, less controlled. He lunged again, this time swiping low. I jumped back, tripping over a loose floor tile, sending me sprawling between two rows of boxes. As I scrambled back, my hand brushed against a heavy, unused lockbox, its surface gritty with decades of grime. An idea sparked. The metal boxes were bolted to the floor, but their doors, while secure, were heavy. Thorn was almost upon me, the key raised high. He wouldn't hesitate. This was the end, or the beginning. It activates something, I blurted, hoping to distract him, to buy myself a second. The amulet. It activates the true power of your keepers, a power Finch found disturbing. His face contorted in a furious grimace. You know nothing. He lunged. I braced myself. Then, with a desperate surge of strength, I yanked on the handle of the nearest deposit box door. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As Thorn closed in, I twisted, allowing his momentum to carry him past me. At the same time, I shoved the heavy, partially open deposit box door directly into his path. The steel edge connected with a sickening thud against his side. He gasped, stumbled, and crashed against the opposite stack of boxes, the key skittering across the concrete floor. He lay crumpled, winded, groaning. I didn't wait. My eyes darted to the key, then to the gaping maw of the main vault, where I'd seen a faint glimmer of something when Thorn first emerged. The amulet. I snatched the key, its polished surface now warm from Thorn's hand. This wasn't justice yet, but it was a step. The heavy metal door of the adjacent deposit box, dislodged by the chaotic collision, swung further open with a protesting groan, revealing not the expected stack of documents or precious metals, but a cavity packed with tightly bound scrolls and small, intricately carved figurines. Thorn, his eyes wide with a desperate animalistic fury, stumbled, his momentum carrying him past me and into the vault's central aisle. The unexpected reveal had momentarily stunned him, his lunge dissolving into a frantic scramble. I didn't hesitate. My arm, still clamped around the locked handle, became a pivot. I swung my weight, using the momentum to spin and drive my elbow into his exposed side. The air left him in a ragged gasp, and he crumpled, hitting the cold concrete floor with a thud. Before he could recover, before the panic in his eyes could coalesce into another attack, I was on him. My knee pressed into his back, pinning him. My hand found the discarded flashlight and pointed its beam directly at the array of ancient objects now spilling from the open safety deposit box. It's over, I rasped, my voice raw, my lungs burning. The words felt like sandpaper, but the conviction behind them was absolute. They're here. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Thorn's heavy breathing and the distant wail of sirens growing steadily louder. He offered no resistance, no further struggle. I relinquished my hold on Thorn, pushing myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. He's secured, I managed, nodding towards Thorn, who was now being cuffed and led away, his face a mask of bitter contempt. The artifacts are in the vault. And there's more. The detective, a woman with sharp, observant eyes, knelt beside the open deposit box. Incredible. As the room filled with forensic technicians and other investigators, a meticulous inventory began. The safety deposit boxes, one after another, yielded their secrets. Not just the one I'd inadvertently opened, but dozens of them, all filled with a staggering collection of artifacts. Pottery shards bearing forgotten symbols, ancient texts, skeletal fragments with unique markings that spoke of ritualistic practices and an array of exquisite, perfectly preserved tools. It was a treasure trove, not of gold or jewels, but of history, stolen and hoarded. The evidence was overwhelming. Their ideology, scrawled in faded ink, spoke of selective breeding, ancient rituals, and the belief in a chosen bloodline destined to rule. The historian, I realized with a fresh wave of nausea, had stumbled upon their legacy, perhaps even been a part of it, until he threatened to expose their true nature. Days bled into weeks. The story exploded across every news outlet, a scandal of unparalleled proportions. Thorne, a respected figure in certain circles, was revealed as the architect of a sophisticated smuggling operation, his public persona a carefully constructed facade. The keepers were unmasked, their network of influential members implicated through the documents found in the vault. I returned to my own small world, but it felt irrevocably altered. The weight of the truth, once a theoretical concept, was now a tangible burden. I had seen the lengths to which individuals would go to protect a lie, to bury a legacy, and the devastating consequences of that ambition. The emotional toll was significant. The images of the historian's fractured bones, the anachronistic details, the glint of malice in Thorne's eyes, they replayed in my mind. I found myself questioning the boundaries of my own work. I sat at my desk, a cup of lukewarm tea forgotten beside a stack of reports. The city outside my window hummed with the indifferent rhythm of life, oblivious to the silent battles fought in hidden vaults. I thought of the future, of the other forgotten legacies, the other truths waiting to be unearthed. Perhaps the role of a forensic anthropologist wasn't just about bones and dirt, but about confronting the dangerous truths that lay beneath the surface, embracing a more active, perhaps even perilous pursuit of justice. The thought was daunting, yet exhilarating. A new kind of excavation awaited.